Those who start listening to him start getting pushed to the fringe of society, like the crazy people we talked about yesterday. They start getting labeled as crazy, extreme. Okay, this cult that's a threat to the society. But this message keeps on growing, and not only does it pick up along the way the weak and the downtrodden and the lack of people without any influence in society, it picks those up too. It starts picking up some influential people along the way too. So, and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq is an influential member of society, radiallahu anhu. Hamza is an influential member of society. Umar ibn al-Khattab is an influential member of society. So some heavy hitters from society are also now accepting this religion. And the cult, from their point of view, is getting bigger. It's getting bigger. The problem is increasing. Up until this point, has the cult, what they call a cult, have they raised their hands against anyone? Have they violated anybody's rights, killed anyone, pushed anyone around? Nothing. All they have done is open their mouth, what you would call freedom of speech, right? They're exercising their right to the freedom of speech. That's all they're doing. But as more and more people start accepting this message, they start learning this man isn't just talking about what's going to happen after we die. And he's not only talking about nations that came long ago. He's also saying that we shouldn't kill our baby daughters. He's also saying that we can't cheat each other in business. He's also saying that all people are equal. Right? He's saying these things that are going to hurt our business. He's also saying we can't have these idols here, and all these people from all over Arabia come to visit as tourists to our city. Why do they come? Because they have to go visit their local god that's being held hostage in Mecca, right? So if these things go away, our whole tourist economy is going to collapse, right? It's like somebody saying shut down Disney World. Orlando's not going to like that because the economy rests upon it. So he's not just talking about religious values, he's also talking about morally reforming society, and this moral reform will have direct repercussions on how the business operates in that society. So which group of people start getting worried a lot more? Not the poor, but who? The rich and the powerful. The rich and the powerful start worrying about this because they're getting threatened about their power structure. If everybody's equal, we can't have slaves that we can kill at our disposal. If everybody's, if we can't, kill whoever we want, and we can't fight, treat our women like property, etc., then this society is the way they are, they're going to change. So they find it a problem. So you know what they do? They say, there's freedom of speech. You can worship any god you want except the one this cult follows. Every other religion is acceptable, except which one? La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. For a society that was so open, so accepting of different religions, they were, literally freedom of religion that we have in our constitution. That's what they had, freedom of religion. You want to worship a tree, worship a tree. You want to worship the sun, worship the sun. You don't want to worship anything, go ahead, don't worship anything. For that society, they went against their own principles to go against this man's speech, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Does that sound familiar? You have a society that says freedom of religion, freedom of speech, except, right? Except, and slowly what starts happening is let's put a curb on Islam. What's being said, right? So now, anyway, this threat, first they start, if the character assassination doesn't work, and accusing him of being insane doesn't work, and calling them a cult doesn't work, what's the next thing these desperate, rich and powerful do? They start physically attacking them. First the followers and then the messenger himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So who was the first one to actually engage in violence? The quote-unquote cult or that society? That society. And in response, did this cult apparently, did they even respond back with violence? No, the commandment was kufu aydiyakum, hold your hands. Don't respond with violence. And when the violence got completely out of hand, to the point where it's just your survival is in question, maybe we should fight back now. Not even then. What was the next thing? Hijrah, migration. Then migration. So who's the criminal so far? Who's actually the criminal so far? It's the Quraysh. And these people that have expelled their own citizens for believing whatever they believe, they've taken over their homes, they've killed some of their family members, they've tortured them. Imagine people of that country, citizens of that country, being tortured, their homes being taken over, them being forced to migrate to another country. Does that sound anything close to fair? Subhanallah. So who are the victims here? It's the messenger and his followers, alayhimu salatu wasalam. And their only crime, opening up their mouth about the truth. Reciting the Quran was their only crime. So they end up in Medina. And in Medina they receive a warm welcome. And their society starts getting established. Who's really threatened at this point? Again, the Quraysh. The Quraysh are threatened at this point. And at this point, when the permission was given to the believers to fight them, when that permission was given, you have to understand, they had the right to retaliate against those who had already killed them and executed them without just cause. So if you want to talk about international law, none of them were broken. No international law, even by today's standards, was broken at the Battle of Badr. And from then on, Uhud and Ahzab and all of the rest. But here's the point I want to close with. If you say that Islam was spread by the sword, in our times, are there countries that are taken over by force? Right? Even in recent history, a country, a village, a region, a territory gets taken over by force, and there's violence in that region. And the violence just doesn't stop because people do not accept if somebody else comes over by force. Every nation has this self-integrity, this concept of sovereignty and freedom, and when that freedom is threatened, they will fight to the death against their occupiers. This is true of Muslims, non-Muslims, anyone. When a country is overtaken, you will find violence in that country. Nobody's going to say, "Oh, welcome, we were waiting for you to take us over." Nobody does that. So you find violence, for example, in rebel groups in many parts of Africa, in Sri Lanka. You find the same situation for a long time in Ireland, right? You find the same thing happening in Iraq. It's not any different from any other part of the world when a nation takes over another. That kind of violence ensues. Now, if in fact the messenger took over by force, what would you necessarily have seen in Mecca after its conquest? You would have seen violence. You would have seen retaliation. What do you see? Complete peace. Complete peace. And not only complete peace, the religion starts spreading like wildfire like never before because people see this as the real peace. Now here's the other thing that you should really think about, especially those of you that are political science students, history students, sociology students. There's very important concepts about the seerah that we should understand. And we should understand our religion in religious terminology and also in secular terminology because you have to engage people who don't know religious terminology. And you have to be able to speak to them in language they understand, right? Here's the thing. The political term is a revolution. That in 23 years, the messenger brought about a revolution in Arab society. Okay, that's what the political term is. Can you think of some other revolutions you heard about when you were in high school? If you went to high school in this country, what other revolutions do you read about? The French Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. You remember these, right? These are the revolutions you read about. And in these revolutions, one thing overshadows everything else. For example, the Communist Revolution was essentially economic in nature, a new economic model for society. The French Revolution was essentially a revolution against the church. The church was in complete control, it controlled the flow of information, it controlled who has the right to rule, but now it was replaced with popular democracy, the Enlightenment, so if you will, right? In all of these revolutions, was there extreme amounts of violence, or did it just happen because some people believed in certain books and minimal violence and the society completely changed? These are some of the bloodiest instances in human history. And the part of the world we call the civilized world, the Western world, Europe, etc., these revolutions took place where? In Europe, some of the bloodiest in history, right? And they brought about change like, the economic structure. But did the language of the people change? No. Did their culture change? Not really. Did the way they eat and sleep and drink, did that change? What they love and what they hate, did that change? Not really. So you could say there was a change at the top, but there were really no practical changes on the bottom. And there were certainly no changes inside the hearts of people. Here's another comment before we turn to the seerah. Let's talk about, for example, the Bolshevik, the Communist Revolution. You know the Communist Manifesto? It's a famous document, right? Das Kapital. You know who wrote that? Karl Marx. Marx was a German. Who wrote the document 60 years before the Communist Revolution. He was not alive when it happened. He never even imagined. You have a guy sitting in the library writing his theory, his philosophy, and decades after his death, people are willing to die for his ideas, right? And kill for them. In other words, what I'm saying is a revolution, it takes a long time for it to boil over. It doesn't happen overnight, especially an ideological revolution. A military revolution can happen overnight. But an ideological revolution, like communism, or like democracy, these are ideologies. An ideological revolution takes many, many, many generations before it comes to fruition. This is human history, okay? Even the French Revolution, centuries. Voltaire, Rousseau, so many writers for centuries, and then the revolution. The ideas presented by the messenger, first of all, they're not his own. They were revealed to him when he was at the age of 40. And the quote-unquote revolution was complete by the time he was what? 63. How many years? There has never been an ideological revolution in human history in 23 years. Never. That's never happened. Ask your political science professor. And not a military revolution, not a coup. Coups can happen overnight. An ideological change. In other words, what does that mean? In 23 years, what people, their purpose in life, what they love, what they hate, how they